So storage as an industry is one of the most insulated commercial spaces in real estate available. Storage over 40 years has been systematically increasing in value. You go through these massive economic shifts that happened in the 80s or happened in 2008, and storage literally doesn't even jog. It just continues to rise, continues to go up.
What is Agent Ignite? Are you wondering how you can make more money and create a competitive advantage for yourself and your clients in this ever-competitive real estate industry? Agent Ignite is the key to furthering your knowledge, establishing your expertise, and positioning yourself as a go-to expert. They deliver new and relevant knowledge so you can expand your clientele, close more deals, and ultimately increase income. Each month features a new guest speaker who will deliver on what is most relevant for your business. As a member of DMAR's Market Trends Committee, an avid champion for building wealth through real estate, and a self-proclaimed data geek, Nicole will share market trends and commentary that will add value to you and your clients. Staying up to date on industry statistics coupled with niche topics delivered by industry experts will help you motivate your buyers and sellers and make you more money. Sign up for the next Agent Ignite session at theruthteam.com/events.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest, Joe Evangelisti. He was known as the Flip King for real estate before he discovered the overlooked profits hiding in the self-storage industry. You're going to learn a technique today that they are doing in the self-storage industry that I've not heard of and not talked about on the show. He went from flipping over 100 homes per year to making 10x more in profits from only doing 5 to 10 storage deals per year. In addition to self-storage investing, Joe is also an author, host of his own podcast titled The Legacy Blueprint, and CEO of 2 other 7- and 8-figure businesses. Joe's going to go through numerous things today that he has learned the hard way. He got into flipping homes in 2007 and learned some lessons the hard way very fast. He didn't stop there, but you're going to figure out how he learned to scale and the pivoting process that he had to go through in building a big business, but then figuring out that there was something better. And he had to, what he calls course correct. I think in business, we have to be flexible and we're able to do that. And it's not easy. I know you're going to learn a lot and be encouraged by Joe today. Joe, I'm excited to have you on the show. The more I've learned about you, I'm like, man, he's going to be a great guest. And our listeners are going to learn a lot from him. I believe you're going to be able to help them in so many ways, just from what you've done. I mean, in real estate, you've changed courses a little bit and you've grown tremendously. And now you're helping many others to do the same. Let's hear a little bit about that though, because you didn't just create a small business in real estate, even in the beginning, right? Before you even pivoted to something bigger. So let's talk up through that a little bit. I know there's many listeners who may even have the same type of business that you did and are trying to get into commercial real estate or syndicating and want to hear parts of that that's going to help them.
Absolutely. Happy to talk about it.
Joe, tell them a little bit about that business. What were you doing? How did you get into real estate? And then we'll talk about that pivot.
So, how I got into real estate is really started in childhood. I had a dad who was in construction. And when I was a little kid, knee high, I used to, walk around and sweep up job sites and learn how to hammer in nails. And my dad was a drywall contractor. So I think by the time I was about 10 or 12 years old, I could actually tape finished walls. And he was also the first entrepreneur in our family. So really kind of always been my hero, always the guy I looked up to. And, growing up on a construction site, I just learned at a very, very early age that I love to see stuff get built. Right? I love to see stuff get rehabbed or built. He would do kitchens, additions, new construction houses. And I just love taking something that's nothing and turning it into something that's beautiful. And so that kind of became a bug for me when I was very, very young. I knew that I was going to be A, an entrepreneur and own a business, and B, probably be in construction my whole life. I got lucky right outside of high school. I tell people that I had this urge to join the military, and I was lucky enough to find the construction battalions of the Navy, the Seabees, they call it. So I did 6 years as a Navy Seabee right out of high school and actually got to build stuff while I was serving my country, while I was wearing a uniform, and went to all kinds of amazing places around the world and did construction. And, shortly thereafter, jumped right in both feet into real estate and got myself into some rehab deals at I would say what I call also a lucky time, which was right around 2007, 2008. If you guys can recall that, we did our first deal in 2007. And I call it a lucky time because it created such an opportunity for us to learn how that business is tough, and business, you have to pivot, and business, you have to course correct. And so we were about 3 deals deep, fix and flipped, all doing it by hand, me doing the construction work, the finish and the drywall, the trim, the cabinets, the countertops. And my business partner was like the mechanical guy. He did the electrical and HVAC and plumbing. And like I said, we were about 3 deals deep when the market just completely pulled out from underneath of us, right? '08, everything shifted. We had these 3 rehabs, which, we thought were going to sell and make a ton of money. I had all of my money invested from my years of service into these deals. And, we were lucky in that we turned into landlords unexpectedly. We didn't really want to be, but we were able to stabilize the asset, right? We were able to refinance the asset and get our loan stabilized for a long-term loan. But of course, we didn't get our cash back because banks generally don't want to give you your cash back that you had involved in the deal. So we had to pivot from that point. We had to learn how to do stuff different, and eventually learned how to bring on private investors and use OPM and other people's money, and learn to leverage. And fast forward a couple of years from then, and we were doing it all. I had a brokerage business, we had a flip business going, we were landlords. I had a broker's price opinion business going, and we learned to shift and make something happen, make something out of a bad situation.
So you got in what you thought at the best time, but then, man, it was right before the worst time for so many people. You talk about pivoting, and you talk about how critical that is. You mentioned course correct, and I meant to thank you again for your service. Appreciate just all our servicemen and women. And so, to speak to that moment when you had to make the decision to pivot, that's difficult, right?
Yeah.
When you've been working on this thing so hard, and it's like, man, do I really almost have to give up on part of it to go do something better? But that's not always easy. How did you work through that?
Yeah, I think it's critical for any business success is you have to learn how to course correct. You have to learn how to pivot, right? Ed Milet said this cool thing at the very early stages of COVID. And he said, adversity sometimes forces us to do the things that we maybe should have been doing all along. And, sometimes we get comfortable and we just don't, I get into business and this is what I do. And honestly, Whitney, I think that, when they say 65% of small businesses fail in the first 3 years, I think it's because a lot of people are just so set in their ways. They're afraid to pivot. They're afraid to make change. They're afraid to course correct. And then they just get sunk, And so as a business owner, that was the first of many, many, many pivots that we've had to make through the last 15 years. And I think you always have to be nimble enough to know, hey, this is working or it's not working, or I could tweak it and it could work better, or maybe I need to pack it up and change industries. But your job as the business owner is to make sure the business flourishes and functions and feeds you.
Love that. You said adversity helps us do many things that we should have been doing all along. Incredible. That's incredible. I'm going to be thinking about that today. I hope the listener will as well. That's a great quote. So you had to be willing to pivot. You had to be nimble. You had to be flexible, probably somewhat humble as well. And so, speak to what you did next and, what happened, because you obviously didn't stop there.
Yeah. For many years, we had what a lot of people would consider, a quote unquote, super successful business, right? We got to a point where, fast forward, like I said, 5, 6, 7 years from that point, I was running all these different multiple companies. And one of my biggest aha moments and one of the game changers for me was that at that time, I remember texting my wife vividly. I remember texting her like 6:30 in the afternoon and saying, or in the evening, and saying like, I won't be home for dinner. And she texts me back like, yeah, no kidding. Dinner was at 5:30. Right. And at that point, like I said, we were probably running 6 or 7 different types of businesses and different divisions of businesses. And, I had 2 young girls at the time. My 9-year-old now was probably less than, 1 or 2. And, my 12-year-old was, 3 or 4 or 5. And when that happened to me, I went home, I kissed my girls good night at 9:30. They were already asleep. And I laid in bed and I thought to myself, man, what have I dug myself into? What kind of businesses have I created that I have literally no lifestyle? I have no ability. I'm missing my kids growing up. I'm not taking my wife on dates. And, at that point, Whitney, it was kind of like a low point in my life, even though financially and social media wise, and, all my friends are, oh, you're doing such a great job. Success is awesome. Keep kicking ass. And ultimately they were almost like enabling me to be a bad business owner, right? They were like, keep doing it, keep hustling, keep putting the hours in. And everyone supported me. But at the same time, I felt at my worst. I was probably my heaviest I've ever been. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't going to the gym. I was eating crap all day long, cheesesteaks and pizza at the office. And, and eventually that night I laid in bed and I said to myself, something has to give, something has to change. And that was really one of the big pivot moments in my life too, as well, realizing that you can create businesses that support your lifestyle. You can do things that you love to do and make time for your family and be a good dad and be a good husband and all that kind of good thing, and be a good friend, build great relationships. And so that was probably the number 2 biggest pivot moment for me. And that's what forced me really to get out of my comfort zone and start hiring mentors and hiring coaches and getting involved in masterminds and surrounding myself with, successful people who weren't just successful financially, but lived the type of life that I wanted to live. And that was probably game changer number 2 for me, was really resetting the clock and saying, okay, I got to build businesses that support me, not just the other way around.
It's interesting you mentioned, I've gone through this as well. It's a similar story. It's so funny. I know the listeners are probably thinking that as well to my story. It's a few key things you mentioned there. But I thought what I like too is, you mentioned that, finding mentors that not only were they successful, right, but they were living the life that you wanted to live. I think outside of business too, right?
Yeah.
Many people are successful in business, but man, their home's a wreck, unfortunately. Yeah. And I don't consider that success. And I tell my wife, I pray that, Lord, even if it meant me working at McDonald's to be able to be the best father and husband, okay, that's what
100%.
I'm, whatever, right? It's not worth having a successful business and sacrificing some of the most important things, in your life. So I just appreciate that. Speak to how you found that person though, because that's sometimes difficult to even know that about that individual, that you're trying to find to help mentor or guide you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's funny. Well, just to backtrack on what you just said, and then I'll answer your question. But like a good buddy of mine, Tim Bratz, used to say, why you ask everybody, like, why do they do it? And everyone says, for my kids, right? I do it for my kids. I hustle for my kids. I work for my kids. I spend long hours for my kids. Yeah, well, that's great. But your kids don't know who you are, right? You're missing their soccer games. You're not being attentive. You're not paying attention. They're asking you for attention or connection, and you're shutting them down. And you're like, I'm on a business call. I'm sending an email. Well, it's so hypocritical for us to run around and tell people we're doing it for our family and we're doing it for our kids when we're not even watching our kids grow up, and your kids don't care about how much money you have or how successful you are. They care about having a connection with a great relationship with their parent who's, at that point in their life, it's everything to them. So that was a real aha moment for me, that I had to make that change based on that kind of concept. But to answer your question, social media, man, social media has literally changed the game, the technology, the ability for us to connect. So many of us are following people for years and years without having the guts to kind of reach out. So what I started doing was really paying attention to the people who I think are genuine, who are really talking in a genuine way, who are not really boasting. I didn't just go pick my first mentor because he drove a Ferrari. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I picked my mentor because I thought he was a great dad. I thought he was a great business operator. I thought he was a great lifestyle creator. Had multiple businesses, but seemed to have kind of a lot of free time. And so that was really my first mentor pick was, I want to pick people I want to emulate. And to this day, I have 6, 7 coaches at any given time in different parts of business life and wealth. And every one of those people is a person that not only do I want to emulate for what I hired them for, they're just great people, holistically great fathers, mothers, people that I want to be like.
Incredible. I just appreciate you speaking to. I have 6 or 7 coaches, I want and desire that kind of leadership and guidance and, people that are ahead of me and not just this one thing, but in many areas of my life. And so I just hope the listeners hear that because it is just something that's not stressed enough or talked about. It's just the success part in our business that most people brag and talk about and that you see.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, it's obviously, I'm a little biased because I am an executive coach, but, I believe in it thoroughly. I even have coaches for my kids. I had my wife as a coach, like everyone that I believe wants to get better in some shape of their, way, shape of their life. As long as you have the right coach, it's almost, you got to do the work, but I thoroughly believe in coaching and I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Speak to what your business became then, and then let's talk to how you pivoted then into commercial.
Yeah, the first major step was we really scaled up the single family business, and we got that thing to almost 100 houses a year, where we were fix and flip, buy, fix, flip houses, and that did all right for a few years, but it still didn't make the lifestyle that I wanted. Right, it was still transactional, it was still constant. There was always a push, there was always cash in, cash out, deals closing, deals getting extended. Super, super stressful. And so, probably a couple of years after that, as scaling that business, me and my business partner sat down and we were doing like a year-end review. And I said to him, we did 88 houses this year. How many do you want to do? And he's like, I don't want to do 88 again. Like, so, and then that was another like big pivot shift aha moment for us was, okay, how do we build something now with a more effective team, with a more efficient group? And this is why we call it Legacy Developers, our storage development company, is because I want people to be able to build wealth inside of our environment. How do I build massive wealth, but I can share it and help them create great people, great families inside of our environment? And storage actually wasn't probably the top of our mind. We looked into, multifamily. We looked into whether office and retail. You got to realize this was pre-COVID, thank God, because, obviously a lot of those took a big hit during COVID. And ironically, I ran into storage, and it's a very, very small community of developers and business owners. And it's a very tight-knit community. And one of the first conversations I had with a good buddy of mine now was a single family developer. He had built restaurants. He had built houses in the Hamptons, like massive $10, $20 million houses. He had built tract homes in the Carolinas. And he said to me, Joe, he was on his fourth deal at that time. He said, Joe, the first time you build a self-storage, you'll never touch a house again. You'll pay somebody to build your own house. And he wasn't wrong. It's unbelievable. The scale and the ability inside of the self-storage business. I'm not going to say it's perfect and it's totally easy. There's no push button success, right? You got to overcome obstacles, but at the end of the day, it's way, way more scalable, and it's way, way easier to operate as a business versus 80 houses spread out all over South Jersey, like we were before.
It's interesting. So, 100 houses per year is no small business, right? That took a team, took tons of time and planning, dedication, no doubt about it. You mentioned, just the transactional piece, right? It just didn't make the lifestyle you were looking for, but man, just transactional. Speak to just the transactional piece, and how maybe self-storage is not that way, or is it, or how do you speak to the self-storage business in that light? Yeah, no,
it's simple. We're really, we're taking and doing about 1/10 of the physical transactions, and we're making 10x the profitability and the margins and the time is given back to us because you don't have to do so many transactions, right? It sounds crazy to think, but if we used to buy $100,000 house and put 50 grand into it to make 200, now we're into a project where we have one right now, which is, we're all in for 12 million and it's going to sell for 21 point something, million within 3 years, which is, is a little longer term kind of wait because it's a bigger build and so forth and so on. But, the thing I love about storage is it's concrete, steel, and asphalt. You're not picking out tile. You're not picking out paint colors. You're not picking out countertops and handles and poles and, doing one single family flip. You could spend a ton of time just designing the thing. The storage business, which is great because we do primarily ground up construction and retrofits of big box, is they all look the same. They all have the same facade. They all have the same color. They all have concrete floors. They all have, XYZ finishes on the outside. And so once you spend the time designing one and you create a brand around that one, it's just rinse and repeat.
No one has a decision fatigue or as much as they used to, right? Everybody on the team understands all those things and what it's going to look like, what it's going to be. So I wanted to ask you though, you mentioned, and you answered a little bit of it there, that mostly you're developing now, but I wanted to get your take on like developing versus, buying pre-existing storage as well.
Yeah, we really have three options inside of Legacy. Number one is we do ground up construction, literally clear trees and build from the ground. That's my favorite because we have a construction background. It's what we know. It's what we're good at. The second piece would be, I mentioned big box reconstruction, Sears and Kmart and, these big box, I say all the time, like Circuit City is not coming back into business. I don't know if you ever had one of those before, but the way that the consumer is shifting to e-com and buying things online, your big boxes are going to disappear. It's going to continue to happen. And most townships, really want to stick to that retail front. But when they have a vacancy of 100,000 square foot building in the center of town and there's no other takers, there's no other, big box coming into town, it's a logical choice to switch to self-storage. And guess what? The industry is also switching there, which makes it kind of a win-win, right? Your traditional self-storage was built like off a dirt road in an industrial zoning area, back off the tracks. Now as storage becomes more and more popular and people want to feel secure. They want to pull into a well-lit site and they want it right off of Main Street. They want easy access. And so it's becoming an easier and easier sell to the zoning authorities and the local municipalities to put self-storage in those spots.
Nice. All right. So there's ground up reconstruction of those big box stores. Was there another one?
Yeah, and the third one is value add.
Okay.
I don't see us buying any like complete sites anytime soon that don't need value add. But our goal specifically, and this doesn't have to be everybody's, but our goal is to have Class A space, meaning it's going to be over 100,000 square foot net rentable. And so there's plenty of opportunity to buy 30, 40,000 square foot sites that have additional land next door and expand that site and turn it into a Class A structure.
Nice. What do you see? Or let me back up. Just speak to how the pandemic and some of those things have affected storage. I mean, I've talked to different people, about it, but I'd love your take on maybe your property specifically, and even your business specifically as well. What the pandemic did, pros, cons, are good, bad.
So storage as an industry is one of the most insulated commercial spaces in real estate available, right? If you look at first of all, storage has only really been a thing for about 50, 60 years, right? So they've only been tracking it for the last 40 as an actual industry. But you can go to Marcus and Millichap and find these reports. You can go to Colliers. There's plenty of different reports that point to the fact that storage over 40 years has been systematically increasing in value. You go through these massive economic shifts that happened in the 80s or happened in 2008, and storage literally doesn't even jog. It just continues to rise, continues to go up. And so for that reason, I love it. Obviously, it's my industry, but people don't really they say that, well, why? Why is that? Well, it's because there's such a vast dichotomy of different users inside the storage space, right? There's contractors, there's attorneys storing files, there's mom and pop downsizing and upsizing. Now you have your millennials who don't want to really own or live in a spot. So they're literally putting their life's belongings in a container or a storage unit and traveling around and living in Airbnbs. So what happens in the economic shift is when one thing goes down, another thing goes up, right? If you have, contractors or your home building starts to go down and your contractors start to go down, well, your downsizers and upsizers start to go up, right? So people start to become, personal use. There's just so many different uses that it seems to balance itself out in different economies, which is super interesting.
Speak to how now, you all operate different than other people in the space. You and I talked about that briefly ahead of time, but what does that look like?
What really sets us apart in legacy developers, and I think is very interesting because this is a new industry for us, right? We've only been doing this for 3 or 4 years. And so the thing that I think kind of sets us apart is that we have this crazy background in buying, fix and flip single family real estate, right? We did deals for a decade, all off market, all direct to seller financing, creative financing, creative deal flow. And we did this for 10 years. So it was an easy transition when we got into self-storage to say, okay, well, I'm not just going to pick up the phone and call brokers. We're going to do it the way we used to do it. And so the shift that's happening inside of the industry is people are going like, where do you guys find all these deals? How are you doing this? How are you, entitling off-market land? How are you creating opportunity? And it's like, this is what we know. This is where we came from. This is what we've been doing for the last 10 years. So it's nothing new to us. We just literally changed the product from single family to land development, self-storage, whatever that looks like. And we've also been able to create opportunities for other developers in that same realm. We created a brand called Shovel Ready Storage, where we actually take and entitle and do due diligence and design and 3D renderings and approvals from the local municipality. And we sell that as a package to end user developers. And it's been very interesting to see because these guys are super happy to buy a deal that's prepackaged and ready to go, save themselves 9 months of trial and error and due diligence to get to the finish line. No
doubt about it. You all have taken a lot of risk off the table for that operator then.
A lot.
Yeah. And that's very valuable. No doubt.
Sure.
So that's interesting. And that's probably a unique model that I've probably not talked about on here before or heard of. And so that's incredible. And so how did your team change from going from, all the flipping you were doing and that business model to what you're doing now?
The thing is, I think a lot of it was just experience. We had a culture, years and years ago where we had a lot of people working for us, but we didn't spend a lot of time as leaders trying to cultivate and develop them. And therefore, it just wasn't a great culture. It wasn't a place that I loved to be in. And so for years and years, I would journal and I would say to myself, how do I surround myself with a team of people that I love to do business with? And I must have wrote that, Whitney, I must have wrote that 1,000 times in the last, in the 5 years leading up to self-storage. And eventually what I started to find was, and this is the truth in a lot of coaching, right, is in order to have what we want to have, we have to become the people who deserve what we have. Right. So in other words, I wasn't being a great leader. I wasn't coaching my team. I wasn't teaching them how to become better holistic people and helping them become better fathers and mothers and, and building great relationships. And so that was one of the pivot points when we started this self-storage development company. We transitioned a lot of people. Some of them came with us. Some of them went elsewhere. And I made a determined decision that I have to be a better leader. We have a term inside of our office that great leaders create great leaders. And if I'm not going to step up and become a great leader and help coach and create great people, well, then I can't be upset with the results I get if I don't have the culture that I love. And so I'm happy to say that I absolutely love the culture we have now. And we have amazing people. And it's because of the fact that we pour so much time and energy into making them great holistic people.
Speak to, and quickly, unfortunately, we're running low on time, but I want to ask you, how did you start to transform, your leadership skills?
It goes back to coaching. I coached on leadership skills. I hired the best coach in the world to help me become a better coach. I hired, speaking coaches. I hired performance coaches. I hired people that helped me write syllabuses and teaching and helped me determine how to become a better teacher. And then I implemented. I took action. I actually schedule. We have, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching for executives, but I offer the same one-on-one coaching to specific executives inside of our team. So they go through the same 6-month contract that somebody, would pay a lot of money to do with me one-on-one. I pour that into the executive staff inside of our office.
It's incredible. And even to go back just for a split second on, you having 6 or 7 coaches, and how that is transforming your team, right? You're learning your all these things and implementing it in a way that it's rubbing off on your entire organization. You're taking action ultimately. What about, are you all in the current market? Are you all buyers, sellers? Have any predictions for the next 6 to 12 months?
We are both. I will tell you, when we started out with this thing, the goal was to build a $2 billion portfolio and never sell anything. The market is so frothy right now, and the interest in self-storage sites to be developed and built is so high, and the cap rates are so low that we're literally looking at some of these sites and we're selling them at CO before they have tenancy, which is unheard of. But that kind of thing just started in the last 6 months. It became so competitive. So I think our goal this level is to keep 60 to 80% of what we build and sell 20, 30% of it. And that will probably happen for the next 2 or 3 years until the market, corrects inevitably.
What's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
Conversations like this. I mean, I talk to a dozen new investors every week, probably. And I have a chief investment officer partner of mine who cultivates a lot of that. He has a background in private equity. And so, just having great conversations and determining what is the wants and needs of that investor. We don't try to sell or pitch our deals. I more try to qualify and quantify the investor to make sure that they're a good fit, because our investors, they're like family for us. They get equity in our deals. They ride on forever. We never cut them out of the deal. They're going to be there until the deal sells. They're going to get their money back, in a certain time frame, depending on the deal. But ultimately, I want great people that we can work together with and we can build wealth with. That's what's important to us.
What are some daily habits that you're disciplined about that have helped you achieve this level of success?
I have a morning routine that if I don't do, I'm a total mess. I get up, I journal, I meditate, I drink water, I hydrate. I try to work out in the mornings, which hasn't happened as much recently because I've been doing jiu-jitsu at night. So it kind of screws up my morning routine. But I really try to get my mindset right and try to create what I call mental armor before I attack the day. Long before I'm checking my email, my texts, and following up on social media, I want to make sure that my mindset is set and right and my intentions are ready for the day.
Incredible. If we could just do that every day, especially jiu-jitsu.
It's a game changer. I promise.
What about, how do you like to give back?
We give back in a multitude of different ways. I actually have a veterans foundation called the Addison Quinn Foundation, which really just collects funds to distribute to really, really great nonprofits. So I spend a good amount of my time interviewing veterans-based nonprofits to make sure that, every dollar that's given is going directly to a vet or close to that. I got into that by learning the hard way that there's a lot of charities out there where you give them money and not a lot of it gets to the end user. So we're trying to correct that
Incredible. Joe, it's been an honor to have you on the show and to hear your story. I'm encouraged. I hope the listeners are encouraged and learned a lot, and I appreciate your service as well. But you being able to jump into real estate, and maybe not the best time if you could have waited just a little bit longer, right? Nobody could have known that, but wow, look, you didn't stop. You kept going. You hired people to help you, and you were coachable, and you put things into action. And it's obvious you have done that well. And now you're helping us and many others to do the same. Congratulations just on your success in self-storage, and now even as a coach and helping so many others. How can listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, they can actually visit our site at investwithlegacy.com. They can check out future deals. They can get in touch with us directly, all that type of thing. And, just in general, stay close and hopefully learn something if it's helpful to them.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.